Welcome to another episode of Safe Space, the podcast for next generation family business leaders. Today we're joined by Robert and Kaylee Fukui, based out of Pasadena, California. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Hey, Franco. Hey,
Thank
great
you
to
for
be here.
having us.
So before we get started, if you could let the audience know a little bit about you, how you met and what you guys do to enjoy the wines that you get to enjoy.
Well, we met online on a dating site. I was relatively new to Southern California. I grew up in Northern California, but I'd just been down here about maybe two and a half years. And so, it wasn't like, let's go to a bar and meet girls or whatever. It was like, where did I meet? So this is 21 years ago, 22 years ago. So we're kind of, I guess, forerunners in the online dating space. And so I kind of checked out some sites, and there's this one site, and I said, okay, these women look pretty normal. I didn't know what to expect. I mean, you heard stories, especially back then, 21, 22 years ago, You hear stories, right? And so I'm like, okay, they look pretty normal. And so I'm just, it's kind of like a menu, right? There's all these women, the profiles. And so Kaylee just stuck out. And I sent her a little message, and a few weeks later, she finally responded to me.
Yeah, because I put up my profile and all that, but my girlfriends told me the site that we were on, like every so often they give you free days. And then if you put a picture, you get even more free days. So I would just go on the free days and check and see if anybody had emailed me. And so it was like 2 weeks later by the time I responded back to him and saw it. And he's like, when I responded back, he's like, who's this?
I don't remember you.
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. So a word for any of the single guys out there, your profile says everything. And so actually the picture. So, my background's in marketing. So I actually had a picture of myself on the Swiss Alps skiing with the Matterhorn off my right shoulder. And so I was I'm on top of the gondola at Zermatt, which is, they call it the Matterhorn town. So that's where everybody goes and hikes. But there's also 3 ski mountains. And so I'm on top of the gondola, so I had a friend take a picture with the Matterhorn in the background. I thought that'd be a good shot. And then I stuck that on my profile for my profile on the dating site. And, she's part Swiss.
Yes.
So, hey.
It works.
Yeah.
So share with the audience, what is it you guys do for work? And then we'll get into the show.
Yeah, so we're interesting. We started as business consultants, helping small family business grow and scale and get the freedom they want. And it turned into, we added this marriage piece because we found that most business owners were working so hard, especially the small family business, they're working so hard that it was robbing them time from home. And so as we started talking, working on the business with these clients, but then inevitably, as you get to know them, right, they start opening up a little bit more personally. And inevitably, we always went down the relationship road where it's like, oh, my wife's this or my husband's this, and they don't appreciate what I'm doing for the family and all that kind of stuff. And so, or some of them like, yeah, I don't have time for the family, and it's creating issues. And so, one client after another was talking about this, and so we kind of leaned into our past. We were in counseling for 2 years before we even got married. So that's in our book.
And that's a whole story in itself.
Because 4 weeks after I met Kaylee, she said, oh, you should go to counseling. Mm-hmm. So anyways, that's a teaser for the book Tandem. But anyways, looking back on that time really helped us know how to communicate better and resolve issues. You're never going to prevent conflict or arguments, right, or disagreements. But knowing how to get through them and come to agreement and move forward where both parties feel heard and understood and respected, that's kind of a skill that can be taught. But a lot of us, like Kaylee and I, weren't grown up in that environment, even though, ironically, my dad was a pastor, but he did know how to do conflict resolution, maybe with other people, but not necessarily in their family. So that has helped us be able to work well together. And so we just kind of add that piece into our consulting. So we're still business consultants, but we really have a heart to see that both their business and their marriage and their family thrive at the same time. That instead of too many times we're giving up one for the other, we're going to grow this business, and hopefully the marriage and the family issues will take care of themselves because we're providing, right? But it really takes intentionality to do that.
Yeah, we've worked with a lot of families, and one of the trends that we see is, founders, particularly the male founders, have this belief that I'm providing for the family, which is true. They're accumulating wealth, they're building a business, they're providing the financial security, and it comes at a cost.
Mm-hmm.
and then emotionally they're not there. So
Right.
there's a lack of emotional security within the family, even though they've got financial security scored away.
Right. Exactly.
So how do you assist, your couples to find that balance? You're building a business at the same time, not taking away from this entity called the marriage, because as a lot of folks don't realize, and you'll know this, is in a relationship, there's three relationships. There's a relationship with yourself, there's a relationship each have with yourself, and then there's this thing called a relationship. How do you look after all those three with the stress of a business on top of it?
Yeah, that's a great lead in, because there is taking care of themselves individually. That's kind of where it starts. We got to make sure you're whole, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and then how make sure our relationships, our family, our kids, our relationship with them are whole, and of course the business has to grow and thrive. Right? How do you do that? So we just start with the top self. Like, we just look at what are some basic things you can do. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, right? To create great work-life balance. It doesn't take a lot of time for yourself and your relationships to really grow healthy relationships and grow healthy physically, mentally, emotionally. It just takes more intentionality behind it. And then on the business side, it's just working better. It's not just putting more hours in. So the first thing we do is say, hey, we got to create some limitations and boundaries on how much time you're spending in the business. Because the more you work, especially there's enough from Henry Ford to Stanford's research on productivity, after you get about 40, 50 hours of work week, your productivity actually declines. It doesn't get better. So you can tell your difference in your energy level and your productivity level and your alertness from Monday versus Friday, right? We're much better on Monday and Tuesday because we're just fresh from the weekend, hopefully, or some
Right.
not. And so it's really say we got to create some limitations on that time. And within that time that you're working, how do you just do it better? How do you just get more done in the same period of time or even less? How do you make sure you're delegating more? How do you make sure you're raising up teams, hiring more people, whatever? On the relationship side, it's what are the bare minimum things you need to do every day, regardless of how busy you are, that will make sure you're staying connected with your spouse. For us, it's that every morning we start with our quiet time, we connect, we pray with each other, and then weekly we have a weekly meeting on Monday afternoons. That's an hour and a half, right? Cumulatively, it's not a lot of time. It's just creating more intentionality behind it. And then on herself, first thing in the morning, I have my quiet time, I take my walk, and I try to get my shake. There's some things that we just do, just create some daily habits and routines that are healthy. And it doesn't really take a lot of time. It's just more intentionality, because we waste a lot of time, like just even on our phones. Like if you just check your phones, right? How much screen time you have and how much of that is really productive? How much of those 20 hours on your screen is really that productive? So it's really taking account for where you're spending your time and making sure, especially with family and yourself, making sure those times count instead of just kind of wasting it away.
So how do you handle, or how do you assist your families in handling, you know, the assumptions or the stories that they have about themselves and certain things that get in the way of that intentionality? Like, for example, you know, um, for me in the past, when I took time off, I felt guilty. And what I had to do is I had to reframe that, this time off is a time for me to recharge, to be able to serve better, more productively.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. Yeah, guilt.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help, these high performing entrepreneurs that are driven by the need to provide for their family manage the guilt that comes up when they're not doing that basic need in their mind?
I would say like maybe start with baby steps. Like you're going to spend time with your kids. Okay, I'm going to spend 5 minutes today with my kid. And then gradually try and add it up to like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and like give them your undivided attention. Like, because in my case, my dad worked 6 days a week and wasn't there, I don't think, this day to my graduation. And that's really, I understand the entrepreneur feels guilty not working, but it's hard on the children because our family pretty much shattered from my dad working so many hours. So maybe refocusing and reframing, like my kids are only going to be young for a short amount of
So,
time.
so, so Kaylee, so thanks for that level of vulnerability. I'm going to ask you to go to be even more vulnerable. If that's okay with you.
Mhm.
Can you share with the audience the impact your dad not being around had on you growing up, and how that influenced, uh, you in your adult life?
I just thought maybe he doesn't want to spend time with me. Maybe I'm not good enough. You know what I mean? That he's got more other things that are important to him than me. I come at the end of the totem pole, and so I must not have done something right. And then that carries over into your adulthood. You're like, even I see that the dynamics with my sisters now growing up, my family, you know, everybody's still fighting for time with dad. And we're all adults now. But dad just doesn't, you know, he doesn't have it to give, I guess. Or
He doesn't
and
know how.
so it causes a lot of struggles
Yeah.
and a lot of tension in the family still to this day.
I just want to add too, this is an emotional issue more than it is an action item issue, because it's like feeling the guilty of not spending time in the business and all that. So one time, you know, let's just use our own personal story. You know, I'm one to say yes to everything and everybody. And whether it's volunteer or someone needs help, a buddy or whatever, not just business, right? But just anything. And inevitably I was saying no to Kaylee, essentially, right? Not intentionally, but basically what I'm saying yes to, I'm saying no to her.
Right.
And so one time Kaylee was like, hey, you know, you coach so many other people, you know, whether I'm getting paid or not, you know, you're helping all these other people. Can you help me? And then just the moment she said that, I was like, I get what she's saying without like just challenging me. But she said in a way lovingly that made me think like, oh, I got it. She needs me. And because she's not the one going, hey, I am trying to pull at me. But when all these people are pulling at me and I'm saying yes to that, I'm basically saying no to her. And so I had to reframe, you know, from getting away from the guilt, right? Whether it's business or helping other people, getting away from the guilt was I was like, okay, when I'm saying yes over here, what am I saying no to? And then how does it affect her? And what is it saying? Because even just as Kaylee was saying about how she felt about her dad, right? So if I'm basically repeating the past, I'm basically being like her dad because I'm doing everything else for everybody. And next thing you know, she's feeling left alone in the dust. And so you have to get away from the guilt. It's reframing, not about you're spending time away from the business or you're creating some limitations and boundaries there, but what are you now able to say yes to, and what does it do for them?
And I think it's an important piece you guys both bring up is, you know, particularly for, you know, you parents in the audience that are listening, you know, whether you're older parents because you're senior generation or younger parents because you're the next gen, is when we don't spend time with our kids for whatever reason, they're going to make up a meaning about them, that it's their fault, there's something wrong with them, and they're going to carry that into their adult life, and it's going to have consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So be mindful of the impact you're having when you're not spending time with your kids for whatever reason. And there's always a justification that something is pressing, something matters. You know,
And
as Thomas, our COO that runs the firm, he says our calendars dictate what matters to us.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And then think about the ramifications it's going to have years later when you potentially want your kids or one of your kids to take over the business. You know, this is all about next gen, right? What we found was just like in Kelly's case is I don't want any part of that because like we had a client early on that, you know, the kids were young, well, college and high school. And we asked them, you know, do you want the kids to take over the business at any day? She's like, no, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm like, why not? Have you ever, I don't think you've had this conversation with them, right? No, they probably won't do it. They don't have any interest in business. And I said, why not? And so then I asked her, I said, so tell me about the early days of building this business. And basically, like a lot of entrepreneurs, spent all her time and energy. And she was also a single mom. So, you know, I do understand that. But she spent all her time and energy in the business. But basically, it seemed like the kids were just resenting the business. And so that was the block. And so I told her, I said, well, you know, what you might want to do, especially with the older one in college, just bring her in as part of the potential solution because you want to grow this business, but actually bring her in and ask her, hey, do you have any ideas or thoughts about how she run the business? I mean, not exactly like that, but just in general, hey, get input from her of what she might do, maybe even do differently. Because I know as a kid, I would say, I wouldn't do it like that. Right. We all know, I wouldn't do it like my dad. I wouldn't like do my mom. Right. So the kids definitely have, even if at that age, especially college, you're old enough, you have ideas and bringing them in the conversation. And a few years ago, she invited us to her anniversary for her business. And she invited her two kids up and she said, I'm so proud. Both of my kids are working in the business. And so there they were. So they're able to kind of patch that up, but it's really about bringing them in as helping them be part of the solution. So it's not too late, but also speaking to the beginning is, hey, let's try to prevent that by making sure we're staying connected with the kids even as grown up, because it can create some barriers later on.
Yeah, because like in my situation, the business became the mistress. So as Robert said, it's a competition, and it's the last thing I want to do, because I feel like I've had to fight with this all my life, and I don't want to take this over. I'm trying to get away from it because it's been a thorn in my side.
Kaylee, as you brought up, right? When parents are talking about the kids about taking over the business, I think it's also important to ask the kids, how do you feel about the business? Because, to your point, Kaylee, the business becomes either the mistress of the third or fourth or fifth child, and based on time spent, the favorite child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? So you want me to take over this thing that I've resented because it got all the time and I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And I think what happens, let's bring it back to relationships, is we don't spend enough time asking each other how we feel about things.
Mm-hmm.
We ask, how are you doing? How's your day?
Yeah.
But we don't ask, how are you feeling?
Mm-hmm.
And the typical response is, oh, I'm busy or I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a deflection.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So how do you assist your clients to connect with each other from a feeling perspective? How do you get them to not just connect, but to deepen that connection and that bond?
Well, that's a good one, because I'm like that. I have that kind of response, right? I'm not really connected with my feelings, and Kaylee's always asked me, "How do you feel?" And I said, "Oh, good." So the first thing, like for ourselves, what we do and what we hand off to our clients is we got to create that safe space, because growing up, it wasn't safe to express feelings because that's not what you do, right? Parents don't want to hear it. Dad doesn't want to hear it, right? It's not about feelings, and so I don't feel safe expressing feelings, right? It's very challenging. So we had to create that safe space, and in practice, it can be hard in the beginning, but basically, Kaylee said, "Look, honey, this is a safe space. No judgment. Just share what you're feeling, and you got to take baby steps, right? I'll try one little thing, test the waters, and the more she's able to just kind of walk along and talk with me, not talk at me, and not try to either fix or criticize or whatever, because that's kind of what I would do too. So for me, I have to create that safe space for her, because I'm using that mode of fixing things. So she doesn't want me to fix it. She just wants me to hear and empathize. So, it goes both ways. Like, we have to understand what type of response we give to our spouse that's not creating a safe space. What is the thing that's triggering me that causes me to shut down? So we have to identify what those triggers are that makes it unsafe. And so to avoid those triggers, so we call it rules of engagement. Anytime we're in discussion, sometimes we have a disagreement or we want to trying to express feelings. We have these inbounds and out of bounds. The inbounds is, what's allowed in these discussions. Out of bounds is basically avoiding triggers. And we all know what can trigger the other person. Like the moment I'm trying to fix something that when I haven't asked it and asked her if it's okay, do you want a solution, right? Then it's going to just shut her down.
Well, and a good question to ask is, what do you need? Because like I might be upset about something and Robert's come up with 100 solutions, and that's just getting me more upset because I feel like he's not listening to me. I remember one time he said, because I was getting upset, and he's like, "Honey, what do you need?" And I said, "I need a hug." And he's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah."
I thought she was messing with me.
So he gave me a hug. I'm on my merry way. And he's like, "Wait, I got 10 solutions, and there's got to be more to this. It can't be this simple." He's like, "Come back." And that was all I needed, because at the moment, that was it.
I think that's another great point you bring up, Kaylee, is we forget to ask, what do our partners, what do our kids, what our relationships need? And I think part of that is because maybe, I don't know, maybe we don't think we can give it or we have the capability. But if we don't ask, we're just assuming.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's to your point there. I think at least for me, I can speak for myself, is that's kind of how I just tend to run. You just kind of assume a lot of things. Or, yeah, maybe it is I don't want to hear what you have to say. Maybe I'm afraid that you're going to share something that's going to hurt me or whatever. So, yeah.
So let's go back to that example of, Kaylee saying, "I just need a hug." What was that like for you, Robert? Like, because I'm sure it was out of left field. You weren't expecting that.
No.
You had your plethora of solutions,
Yeah,
but that wasn't on it.
I had a flip
What was
chart.
that like for you? What did you learn from that?
Well, no, literally, I was looking at her like, a hug. I'm like, I'm like, you're messing with me. I'm like, you're setting me up for something. And I gave her a hug, and then she did walk away. She was like, thank you, and she walked away. And I'm like, that was it. Like, it was that easy.
Were you disappointed?
I don't know if I was disappointed, but I just thought there was going to be so much more for me, substantial thing I had to do. So what it taught me was, well, ask, because we did come up with that solution about asking, what do you need from me? That's probably one of the first times I probably did that. And, the answer was so simple. And I was like, man, I should just ask this all the time. It's like, what do you need? Because, whenever you're sharing something with your spouse or with anyone in general, customers or whatever, because we even do that even with clients. And I've told that to our clients to talk to customers about it. Whenever there's an issue, ask them what they need. So they either they just want to be heard and empathize, or they need a solution, right? Those are the two pathways basically. But for most of us entrepreneurs, especially A-types, we're going down solution route, not about the hearing and the listening and the empathizing route. And so therefore, a lot of our arguments is because we're going down just the wrong path. And so that was just a simple way to understand, okay, which way do I go? Instead of just assuming this is the way to go, and which causes issues. So it just taught me, it was very simple. Just find out what they need, what she needs, and it'll go much smoother than me just jumping into something.
So what's one piece of advice you can offer founders and their next gen, based on your experience in the work that you do?
Well, like you're talking about more on the relationship route, or just
go where you go. It's an open-ended question. So maybe from a relationship perspective, what's one piece of advice you can offer to the
I would,
listener
I
around
would,
relationships?
I would say let them be their own person, because a lot of times, in my case, my dad wanted somebody to be just like him in every form or fashion. But you know what? We all think differently. We all have different strengths and different gifts. So I say, let them be who they are. And you know what? You might be surprised at the things that come out of it that you hadn't thought about. And you're like, oh, that's a great idea. I have never looked at it that way. Or maybe they're going to come up with a better idea than what you had. So don't try and force your children into being just like you and expect your legacy needs to look just like you, because a lot of times the founder starts out looking at one type of person, and then the next person that takes it over is not going to be the same type of person.
Right.
Yeah, and for me is the calendar issue. It's like calendar in. If family, your marriage and your family is a priority, then calendar that in. First thing in the morning, whatever dinner time, calendar is, block it, protect it, because then what it tells your spouse and your kids is that you're most important. That even though a client might call or employee issue might rise up, but not during our protected time. Now, there's certainly times for emergencies, but those should be rare, not the rule, right? And like one of our clients, like the first week we were engaged with them, we talked about this, and so they established Family Fridays. And so basically just took Friday off and says, I'm going to be with the kids. And it's like the most meaningful time. So he's busy 6 days of the week, but those Fridays are like their Sabbath, but it's their family time and it's protected. And so certainly sometimes it gets adjusted a little bit, but still Friday is a time for them. And they can still feel connected as a family, even though they might be busy in business and other extracurricular activities. So calendar in your priorities.
So if families wanted to learn, or the audience wanted to learn more about you and find out more about what you do, how do they find you?
Yeah, just go to marriedentrepreneur.co/save space. So we actually created a specific landing page for our audience, and there's a freebie called 5 Daily Habits to Thrive in Tandem. So just 5 practical tips that will help you make sure you take care of yourself as a person, physically, mentally, emotionally, and physically, and then also with your spouse and your family. Just 5 things that you can do. Doesn't take a lot of time. It just takes a little bit of intention to do that.
Robert, Kaylee, want to thank you for your time and your wisdom and your vulnerability. Really appreciate your perspectives and your sharing.
You're welcome,
Thank you
Franco.
for having us.
We'll have to open up a bottle of Brunello sometime.
Absolutely. One day we will do that. So audience, as you know, our guests volunteer their time and their expertise and their wisdom because they care about you. You know, we recognize that being a next gen of a family business is a very lonely place. And we strive to find guests that can speak your language and that can provide guidance to you on the path. So if there's anything that Robert or Kaylee shared with you that spoke to you, please drop us a comment, share it. But most importantly, share the show with others who are just like you, who may be struggling in their relationships, you know, don't know how to connect or are struggling with how to make time for the family. You know, please share the learnings. Robert, Kaylee, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Franco.
Thank you for having us.